And I really cannot think of anyone who's coming from whatever background you name it to find a job in a museum today. So, and especially in India, where in the last decade we have been seeing a large number of different types of museums coming up. You know, there are science galleries, there are contemporary art museums, there are museums that straddle socio-political issues. There are, of course, art and archaeology museums. So I think it's absolutely natural for anyone who's studying whatever they are studying to imagine a future in museums in India or anywhere else in the world. There are many stakeholders, you know, there can be financiers, there can be historians, there are conservators who will sometimes hold off saying, hey, you cannot display this object because it's really delicate. But that INTAC used to have a travel grant for young scholars to sort of travel around and see. Of course, there is the Charles Wallace India Trust Awards.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to EduTalks by AB and Abhishek Boral initiative, where we explore the fascinating intersections of education, culture, and professional expertise. Today, we are diving deep into the world of museums, heritage conservation, and the art of preserving history. It's an absolute honor to have with us today Joyoti Roy, an expert in museum and heritage management, and currently serving as the Assistant Director of Projects and Public Relations at the iconic Chhatrapati Shivaji Vastu Sangrahalaya. Welcome to EduTalks, Joyoti.
Hi, Abhishek. Happy to be here.
Great. So without wasting much time, we'll just hit on to knowing a little more and for audience to get to know you while we have the conversation. So, because I have known you for a while now, so you had studied physics in your first degree. So, how easy or hard was this transition from, say, a quantum to curation? You know, a lot of students who are doing their first degrees in other fields, okay, but have an ardent interest in, say, museum or arts. How do they turn this avocation or passion into something which is more professional and vocational?
Thank you, Abhishek. And yes, I'm really glad that I'm having this conversation with you because I feel that each time I share a little bit about how this transition happened, I've always found people, following a path that leads them to their passion. Um, I have to say that as you already know, but I grew up in Delhi. I grew up in Chittaranjan Park, and in a Bengali family, we're always sort of exposed to different kinds of arts. And one of the things that I think my family and my neighborhood gave me was theater. So when I went on to doing my graduation in physics, the one thing that I dearly missed was time for rehearsals. And while I really enjoyed my course in physics, and now actually looking back at the fundamental science that it gave me, I really wish that I had not done anything else but physics. But at the time, I figured that it left me with very little time to do everything else. So when I finished my graduation, I had almost made up my mind that I wanted to do something which was midway between the sciences and the arts. I didn't know what until I fumbled upon a very tiny 6 by 6 centimeter advertisement in the Hindustan Times, which said that the National Museum in Delhi had this master's in conservation of art, history of art, and museology. So I made my way there and I tried to find out what this course was all about. But before I did that, I walked through the galleries of the National Museum, which I probably had seen when I was in school. And I was utterly fascinated by everything that was on display. And I almost made up my mind, even before writing the entrance, that this was going to be my future. Really, I think today, any professional field is a cross-disciplinary one. So gone are the days where you think that you will hold on to one subject and just be in it for the rest of your life. Every now and then, great opportunities of cross-disciplinary research work really come your way. And I would really encourage everyone to just take it up. And for me, actually, museums are the perfect laboratories for cross-disciplinary work, because this is where, scientists can meet artists. This is where biologists can meet conservationists. This is where art managers or heritage managers can meet researchers. Curators can meet, all kinds of professionals. So it really has become that multidisciplinary, cross-disciplinary laboratory today for society, where so many different fields can crisscross. And I really cannot think of anyone who's coming from whatever background you name it, to find a job in a museum today. So, and especially in India, where in the last decade, we have been seeing a large number of different types of museums coming up. There are science galleries, there are contemporary art museums, there are museums that straddle socio-political issues. There are, of course, art and archaeology museums. So I think it's absolutely natural for anyone who's studying whatever they're studying to imagine a future in museums in India or anywhere else in the world.
That's so nice to hear. And in fact, like I love to tell you, you mentioned the different types of art curations that are happening at this point of time, which actually gives a lot of impetus to students from different backgrounds to kind of join onto the museum cart in that sense. When we speak of areas of art curation, personally, which is the most challenging that you feel?
So my theory is that nobody is born a curator. You cannot really train anyone to be a curator until and unless they go through this transformation in their head. And the transformation is actually quite simple. When a person feels that they have something to say through objects, that's when they actually transition into being curators. And in this case, I'm quite grateful to the CSMBS, because it is that kind of an institution which doesn't, push you into watertight compartments. I came in as a heritage manager. I came in as a projects, somebody who's been running exhibition and international projects in the museum and art sector for a long time. But my first stint with curation was in 2019 with a very small exhibition called Small Matters. And it was all about the idea of miniaturization. And it was a tiny exhibition with some select objects from the CSMBS. And I was really given a lot of independence to experiment, showing objects, of the miniature. I actually began with showing a dollhouse, and we went on to looking at objects such as pop-up books, all kinds of miniaturized objects that have existed in the world. And my point really was that, showing objects and their traditional histories is one way of curating. But another way of curating can also be to experiment with the sort of objects that are put on display. And here is where I actually put on my physicist's cap, but curated objects from the museum's collection. So there was a little bit of history, there was a little bit of science, there was a little bit of psychology about why people are, they get really mesmerized with miniature objects. How does that play out in the digital world, and all sorts of things. So to be honest, I think if one feels passionately about a certain subject, the curation becomes easy. What is not easy is to convince everybody else, who's part of this whole process or is part of the institution, to let them see how projects like these, experiments like these might work. So there's a lot of consultation, there's a lot of convincing that curators have to do to a whole lot of other cohorts, and rightly so, to make sure that exhibitions are successful. There are many stakeholders, there can be financiers, there can be historians, there are conservators who will sometimes hold off saying, hey, you cannot display this object because it's really delicate. So all these conversations at some point lead to a successful exhibition. And the most important people here are, of course, the public. I think increasingly museums have become visitor-centric. So maintaining a balance between playing to the audience, which can be quite easy, and really providing some new material for them to be challenged with, for them to learn something from, I think is sort of the main difficult task for curators today, as it is for me. I don't really come from a traditional history learning background, but I'm equally excited by history. And I fortunately don't have the baggage of telling history in a certain way. So for me, that's sort of a kind of an advantage. But at the same time, a person like me might need way more conversations to convince my cohorts to see what I'm saying. And here again, I think an institution like the CSMVS is very encouraging because people here have a culture of listening and participating.
That's great to know. And I loved it when you shared the experience of your first curation cut to you just curated an exhibition with ancient sculptures at British Museum. Lot of it. So, in this journey, like a lot of aspirants who are looking for that skill development within this field of art curation, you rightly mentioned the different elements that you kind of got together while you were planning the curation. So, any support opportunities that you think aspirants or budding curators can get in which they can develop this skill, in case there are any grants, any organizations which actually look at, they can volunteer in, which actually look at their upskilling in that sense?
Yeah, so actually there are several, but before I go on to those, there's something that I want to share. Curation is like publishing, and you don't publish just because you are a publisher. You publish when you have something to say. And it does take a little while for any young professional in the world of museums to come to a point where, they will be able to deliver a successful exhibition, because curation is not just about making a selection of objects. It's really about understanding why that particular exhibition should even happen in today's world and day. So it really requires a certain level of maturity, of understanding the world, of understanding objects, collections, their histories, and really be empathetic to your public, at the same time putting across your ideas. So I would actually really advise against people jumping into curation in the beginning of their careers. What they should do if they are in the museum field, even if they have actually studied art history or curation, is to spend at least 5 or 6 years working within a museum institution. Understand how collection management happens, understand how museum processes crisscross, what are the different rules and regulations under which objects are loaned, borrowed. There's a little bit of hard work and toil that I feel people, especially the young, should go through. They should really get their knees dirty a little bit before becoming curators. And to that end, there is no replacement to exposure. So even before one actually starts to think about curation, one must see as many exhibitions as possible in the city that one is operating in, but also when there are opportunities to travel to other cities or even other countries. So for a person who's seriously pursuing a career in curation, I would say they should begin with getting their tools oiled first for a few years. And it could be any institution. It could be a small museum. It could be a university museum. It could be anything where there are collections, even digital collections. After having done that, it would be ideal for them to travel around a little bit, because what that allows is to absorb different contexts, visit as many museums as possible. Within India, I'm sure there are some travel grants. I do remember that INTAC used to have a travel grant for young scholars to sort of travel around and see. Of course, there is the Charles Wallace India Trust Awards, which are for slightly mid-career professionals, but it does allow you to diversify and experience in other countries. I think the Asia Europe Foundation has a travel grant for scholars or professionals to travel around and see. So a little bit of traveling and absorbing and self-learning can be quite helpful. What is also extremely helpful in the museum world is to have a mentor. And it may not happen naturally. One may have to choose, and be after some mentors or follow some professionals. All these things within the first 10 years of one's profession will make, a person ready to kind of have a stint in curation. I would seriously advise against people sort of jumping to do a master's in curation or in museology immediately after they've finished their grad. I would encourage them to spend a year or two working or gaining some experience, gaining some knowledge, and then going abroad to study, because that's what opens your prospects of understanding what you're looking at and really learning from it. So that's what I would say. And like I said, even if you have a maths graduation, or you have a graduation in computer science, or you have a graduation in literature, all of these people have the prospect of pursuing a career within a museum institution, because there are so many things happening, in research, publication, digital. All of these, need professionals, but they must understand the museum as an institution also.
Great. When we started our conversation and you mentioned the different types of curation happening, I think museums now has had a huge transformation to what we saw museums say a decade back to what it is now. And I think these are all different types of stories that do kind of come across to uphold the history, the cultural inheritance, and things like that. And very interestingly, there is a campaign by the Ministry of Culture along with the National Council of Science Museums in India, which has launched the Har Ghar Museum campaign, part of it. Do you think such campaigns, which are happening at mass scale, would actually give impetus to more minds coming into the museum field, or if not, create a lot of awareness on how we can preserve our cultural inheritances? What's your take on
Yes, yes. No, I mean, certainly. I think in this age of social media, everybody is a publisher. Everybody can publish their opinion and their collections. I think the call that went out on the International Museum Day, which I suppose has been essentially being implemented by the National Council of Science Museums, mainly because they have a great background in managing digital projects like these, is quite interesting. What one does wait to see is how consistently it will be taken up, and how many people will actually come forward and participate. What it might do in the end, if it is successful, is actually put together some kind of a digital database of artworks, antiquities, and personal possessions of historical significance that are really coming from the grassroots. And I think in the way that this is a digital participatory project, if it is successful, it'll really garner a large, database of objects that are probably lying unidentified or even, unknown. For people who will come forward and participate in this must also know that if they are publishing any antiquities that are not registered but are their heirloom, will also be putting antiquities out there for to be seen by everyone. And then the natural step really would be for them to understand that such antiquities are not really allowed to be exported out of the country. So, while there's a great opportunity where they will be publishing their, personal collections in a very, friendly and in a very participatory way, but they must be mindful that, there are heritage laws in the country, and they should also equip themselves with it before they start publishing any antiquities that are over 100 years old on a public domain like this. I'm not warning against it, but this is something that people should be mindful of. Um, and I think finally, what it can do is really provide for everyday objects that have heritage value and historic significance, for other people to appreciate and understand. At some point, obviously, it would be great if all of this can be put together into a database for people to learn from, because clearly there will be objects and ideas and data coming from different states of the country, from different kinds of cultures. It'll also show how plural our culture is, if this database really makes its way to everybody.
Right. All our best wishes to the initiative so that it achieves the opportunities and objectives that it came through. So thank you so much, Jyoti, for your time. And for the viewers, thank you so much for watching. Do like and share and hit the bell icon for more such content.